In 2013, a group of Muslims in Australia embarked on a mission to ensure that Muslims in need were never left behind.
Ours was a community entirely reliant on the government to look after our problems.
Outside of social security, Muslims had no systematic way or infrastructure to look after their own.
To look after spouses and children abandoned or abused in harmful relationships.
To look after refugees or international students unable to receive any financial support in our country.
To look after Muslims on the streets because of cyclical poverty or the traumas of life.
And to support children with special needs and the desperate families and carers that struggle to support them.
Our vision at NZF was inspired by this gap and the Islamic obligation for us to look after our own, right here in Australia, powered by the blessing of Islam's third pillar.
And so was born a community institution that had a crystal clear vision, a confident, self-sufficient Australian Muslim community where no individual in need is ever left abandoned.
As we mark our 10 years in operation, we've distributed more than $14 million in Zakat locally to help change some 19,000 families.
And in the process, NZF has helped create an incredible infrastructure for the fulfillment of Islam's third pillar, right here in Australia.
A system that is now a movement, bringing together more and more leaders, organisations, partners and specialists to help create change where it's most needed in our community.
And every year, this movement gets stronger.
It is through this movement and its delivery of Zakat that NZF is helping alleviate poverty, turning Zakat recipients into Zakat givers.
Whether they are refugees or victims of abuse or people left homeless.
We're immensely grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for His help and to our community for its generous and continuing support.
But for us, this is just the start. And as we look forward to the next 10 years, we'll continue to strive every day to build an independent, self-sufficient future for our community.
A future in which this great pillar of Islam achieves its objectives and no Muslim is left abandoned.
This is our community's future and you are invited.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Dear brothers and sisters, I hope you're all well on this, Tuesday evening I think it is, on the cusp of Ramadan. I hope you're all doing well. It's a fantastic time of the year. You can feel the vibes in the air. And here we are with another episode of Real Talk. It's about to become Ramadan Real Talk, which is of course what happens in Ramadan with a large series of episodes of some fascinating topics and guests from our community who I look forward to having on in the next few weeks alongside Sister Reem. But here today, and to rip right in, we have a very, very special member of our community who I think needs no introduction to most people, but I'm obliged as the host of this episode to give a small introduction, and then I'm going to let the rest of Talal's life do the talking through the discussion that we have planned for you today. For those of you who are joining us for the first time ever, Real Talk is a series of episodes done under the show to explore important issues facing the Muslim community, hence the name, organised by the National Zakat Foundation Australia, the Australian branch of a global Islamic NGO that seeks to bring the blessing of zakah back into our local communities where there are so many people in need. Now tonight we have the managing director, founder, entrepreneur involved and associated with Crescent Wealth. Crescent Wealth is Australia's first and largest Islamic superannuation fund, and was quite a trailblazer in its inception, as was NZF at exactly the same point around 10 years ago. So it's a bit of a funny time to be having this conversation. And the man who was there since the genesis of the super fund is brother Talal Yassine. We will go into Talal's life, and so I'm not going to sort of do any sort of spoiler, but Talal, alhamdulillah, is a well-known figure in our community by way of being an entrepreneur, business leader, and so forth. And we're going to unpeel some of that and find out who the real Talal is. Talal, brother, assalamu alaikum. How are you? Great to have you on.
Thank you.
Long overdue.
It took a while.
It took a while indeed.
Yeah.
It took a while to get you in this place, but really looking forward to tonight's discussion.
Yeah.
And I guess I want to start, for people who don't know, and even for us who do know you, but maybe don't know you closely, tell us about the Talal story. When we're talking about this is the hood, you are from it.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about who is Talal in a nutshell.
Well, it's very interesting because I wear a suit and I look like a middle-aged man, like any other lawyer out there that was practicing. Most people do know, but they don't remember that I'm actually from the hood. I grew up, I'm wearing Bankstown at the moment. My kids come to Al Firdaus around the corner every Saturday. I've been coming here for 20 years. I grew up in Guildford. I went to Granville Boys High School, and I was the school captain of Granville Boys High School. That august institution of education, alhamdulillah. Always there, man, alhamdulillah. So I grew up in Western Sydney. I'm of and from the community. I'm a direct product of the community and a product of Lakemba Mosque. I actually grew up in Lakemba Mosque. We used to play soccer with Sheikh Tajuddin Hilali. He taught me soccer. I used to spend endless nights at the mosque. I went to camp in 1993. Zach Matthews reminds me in Wiseman's Ferry. He actually remembers the day.
Wow.
And I drove a cab like every good Muslim from the community. So I drove a cab 2275 for 10 years in Auburn and surrounds. So when I come to Lakemba, Greenacre, Guildford, Maryland, I'm very much at home, despite wearing a suit and having too many white teeth.
Looked after yourself, alhamdulillah. So from a career perspective then, drove a taxi. How did that fit into where you were and where you are now?
Well, I'm like a lot of our community, first generation. My parents came here on the 18th of January 1977, the day the Granville Bridge fell. So we arrived in the afternoon. I think the bridge fell in the morning. And so we've been here for over, I think, 45 years now. And I was 4.5 years old. And so my parents, Lebanese Muslim from North Lebanon, quite a few came at that time after the Civil War. They had 3 kids then. I was the oldest, pregnant with the 4th, my sister Raja. And my parents ended up having 8 kids, grew up in Western Sydney. They wanted for their kids what every parent wants for their kids, and that was a better life, but they were always going back. 40 years later, they decided they weren't going back. They believed they were always going back.
So always had a mental...
Always. You were physically here, but mentally there.
Okay.
And I think a lot of our community will resonate with that. Yeah. And I feel for them because, they say our generation, the generation that came in, the kids of the first... really were lost between culture. I don't believe that's true. I think they're lost. We're clearly Australian Muslims, We have found our place. And so we ended up having 8 kids. I'm the oldest of 8. We went to Granville Boys High School and Macarthur Girls. And alhamdulillah, this country, otherwise known as paradise on earth for us, really, we're the Australian story, so to speak, but raised in the Muslim community by the Muslim community. I then went to university. Went to Sydney University and Macquarie University, and I had 3 jobs. I drove a cab, I worked at a service station. In fact, there was a solo, it's not a solo anymore, on the corner of Chilora Road and the Hume Highway. Worked there for 4 years. Okay. Just near Malik Fahad, on that corner. I don't know, do you remember that?
Yes, well, yeah. I don't remember that, but I know what you're talking about.
Well, that solo was there. So, and I worked the 3 jobs through university. Right. Even though I became student leader, got involved in law, got involved in politics. We grew up with a family where we had to self-fund ourselves, go through university, but they brought in HEX about my time, which was a good thing. Okay. Right, so we all got educated through HEX.
Labour government, was it?
Yeah, it was the Labour government. Yeah, always Labour government. Yeah. Labour government brought us, Labour government educated us. Not showing my flags here at all. But, and that's why I'm committed to the Labour Party, He actually brought us here, educated us. And Alhamdulillah, we have found some medium of success. And by success, I don't mean financial. I mean ability to help others. Because for me, happiness is your ability to serve. And we've had the privilege of having an ability to serve others. Most people are struggling to survive, especially in this current environment, and especially overseas. So we have, alhamdulillah, fi barakat rabbil alameen, we feel very grateful to be able to be very proud of our roots and where we came from, whether that be Lebanon and Western Sydney and the traditions of my parents, but mostly of being proud Australian Muslims.
Okay, so you studied law?
Yes, I did.
Why law?
I don't know, actually.
Yeah. Was it just one of those things?
I actually was like 11, and I decided I was going to become a lawyer. Okay. I don't know why. There was no great moment where someone went to jail and all the rest of it. In fact, I went through Granville Boys. For those who know Granville Boys, they're worse than Punchbowl Boys. And so, but I think one of the main things as to why we were not known to the police ever was we were much more fearful of the police than my mother. So my mother terrified us. I'd rather have been arrested than have actually been known to the police. So I went to Granville Boys, very well known to the police, most of us. In fact, I tried to get a 25th anniversary, because I was school captain, of my year, 1990, in Granville Boys, and we did not have quorum because most of us served at Her Majesty's pleasure, which is a really smart-ass way of saying we're in prison.
Oh, goodness.
And so that's the ecosystem I grew up in. But from my perspective, I learned a lot of hard lessons, but my parents really wanted us to serve. And even in a really tough environment, they taught us the principles of discipline, hard work, and resilience. And that's kind of the story, if there is anyone. And we worked our way up. We worked at Flemington Markets. I worked as a taxi driver. I worked as a garbage cleaner. I worked for a company called Jimaba, it's dead now, that was a flower courier delivery service. I mean, there was so many odd jobs that we did to actually build ourselves up.
What were some of the challenges that a family like yours faced? For those who have no way of resonating with that.
Well, I think depending, if you're from a Lebanese Muslim background that came in that cohort, there was like 200,000 that was shipped out. The main, biggest problem is they came from my parents came from villages and villagey areas as opposed from the cities.
Yeah.
The majority, not everybody. And they really found it hard to live in a Western urbanized society. That was the main problem, like the biggest problem. To living in an urbanized society where the village does not raise your kid. You needed to raise your kid directly in a nuclear family. But I think they had resilience, and there's a lot of stories I could tell, but I'm sure people can resonate. But like when my sister Nora was about to be born, my dad had so little understanding of how the ambulance system works that when my mother broke her waters and it was time to have the baby, he didn't know what to do. So he went to the local service station on Woodville Road in Guildford, and the guy closed down and took my mother to hospital to have the baby. He actually closed down a service station. So people can resonate with that, because that used to be Australia in those years. I mean, it wouldn't happen these days. But for those who are Southeast Asian, Indian, Pakistani, Bangladeshi, Sri Lankan, who are middle class but came here because their parents were doctors or lawyers or accountants, and middle class I mean educated, they have very different, and you can see the splits in the community, very different, I guess, integration into Australia, because most of the Lebanese who came couldn't speak the language, and to this day they can't speak the language, but their kids became very quickly educated. And so the challenges, I think, one, education, two, ability to live in an urban area, and three, the cultural dynamics to this day are so very different. And you'll find that as my parents' generation have reflected on their years, I think they reflect on the challenges and the loneliness, but they also reflect on the really good things. For those who speak Arabic, 2EA radio resonates really loudly. And people would be smiling now, because I remember that cultural, it was SBS Arabic radio.
Right.
Nabil Nabil Sabah.
Yeah.
That was who would speak in the Lebanese dialect and Egyptian dialect, would resonate. And it was like a different world. So there's nowhere to call. But they really then became Australian without even knowing it. So they would stand in lines and they'd wait their turn. And they would like, they'd go back to Lebanon, for example, and like not get served in a bank because people don't wait in lines in Lebanon. They would, the Oka view of mateship, even though they never reflected it in that way, but that presentation of equity in society, they actually now have that within themselves. So they became like most people who came to Australia. They become the light, LIT version of whatever culture they had. And they're integrating. Now, if you look at their kids, we're to a large extent very much more integrated, much more comfortable. And if you look at the, mashallah, the Australian Muslim community, with all its challenges and all its, difficulties and all the things that we can say are not right, subhanallah, in the last 20 to 30 years, and I'm 50, so I've been around for a while, it's gone ahead in leaps and bounds. NZF, the Crescent Group, the LMA, the way it's developed, the UMA, the AFIC, the ANIC, these institutions with all the challenges that they do have propelled the community so far forward. It's almost unrecognizable. And as I go around the country, talking to groups through the Crescent Institute, Crescent Foundation, subhanAllah, the brothers and sisters are amazing, and our future looks quite in their hands, in hand.
Nice, absolutely fascinating. So okay, so you went to university, and what did you do from a work perspective? Since there's a PwC story in there somewhere. So how did that sort of all happen?
So I went to university, discovered a whole new world. Instead of, I always wanted to be a lawyer, and I don't remember exactly how, but since I was 11, I wanted to be a lawyer and help our community. But then I got my HSC mark, which is the HSC mark, and I went to Granville Boys, and there was scaling then. And for two reasons. One, I wasn't very smart. Two, the scaling. I got nowhere near getting into law at Sydney or Macquarie. So I did the SAB law, which is now known as LA, the Legal Practitioners Board course. And I got into arts at Sydney University. And the first thing I decided to study in Sydney University was Islamic Studies with Professor Ahmad Shpul.
Interesting. Okay.
Because I wanted to serve our community. I did a couple of years there, and I moved to Macquarie into BA LLB law. But I discovered there's a different side to law. I discovered the ALP. I discovered politics. I discovered Muslim political activism. And, it's a meritocracy at university to a large extent. Well, it was in those days. And I fell in love with the idea of serving the Australian Muslim community in any way I could. And that was through either law or politics.
Why? Why did someone like you want to serve the community?
Just because I think it's instinctive. Because when you went to Macquarie University or Sydney University, and as you went to, which one did you go to?
UNSW.
Oh yes, you call that a university. Okay. This is the old debate within our own family. Yes, okay. But when you went to university, any university, you'd see how much out of the system we were. You'd recognise that the Muslim community, like clearly, where did you go? I used to say GPS schools. I used to say GBHS, hoping they'd confuse it. What is GBHS? Great public schools, right?
Yeah, that's right.
I went to Granville Boys High School. Nobody knew what it existed. Nobody knew a Muslim. We were on the outer in every aspect of society. And for me, I had and I actually can't really explain it, but I had an urge to serve. An urge for my community, because my identity is Australian Muslim, unashamedly, unmistakably. And I think that was inculcated with Sheikh Tajuddin Hilali and the FAMSI and the MSAs and the Islamic schools that I went to, including my parents, a big debt of gratitude to them for bringing us up with the Islamic spirit. I'll say I'm any kind of perfect Muslim whatsoever. In fact, far from it. But that is core to me. And which is the best way, as I got into professional politics and I got into professional law studies and I started working in a law firm, I realized we're a million miles away from ever having a voice, a real voice, even on campus. So, and in fact, one of the stories that hasn't really ever been told is when I took over the Students' Council from the leftists at Macquarie University, it was done through the MSA, the Muslim Student Association. They were my main organisers. In fact, the females of the Muslim student organisations. And then that proved to me the ability to actually, we took over the Students' Council. Guess what? The first thing we did? The first thing we did was ask the university for a mosque. The first thing. They said, we don't have any space. So we literally traipsed around the university, found the storeroom and said, that looks like a space we can use. Could we help you move the stuff? And we did. And they thought, I don't know. Well, that was old. And then in the next session, other Muslims took over. And then they actually built a mosque at Macquarie University with wudu areas. And that proved to me, even in my era then, that you can actually make a real difference through activism. And then that carried on in my work afterwards. Yeah.
Okay. And so let's fast forward then. So you've entered the professional sort of sphere initially as, so were you ever a lawyer per se?
Yeah. So I actually was a lawyer for 10 years.
Yeah.
I joined a firm called Dunhill. So I finished my presidency. I left university, graduated in 1997, admitted to the court, and then I started work in February 1997 in a firm called Dunhill, Madam Butler Lawyers. And that was in 1999. They were a small firm, national, but small. But they were a corporate law firm in Barrack Street, Sydney, like in Martin Place, which is a fantastic opportunity. But then they merged into this little known firm, you'd never have heard of it, called PwC. And then became PwC Legal. So actually in reverse, it opened up a global network of, PwC, one of the biggest law and accounting firms in the world. And then I was there for another 8 years, and I left just before the end of 2006. So I was a lawyer as a director of PwC Legal. So I did a long stint, and that's where I got my professional training. Meanwhile, I had given up on politics by about 2001, which is a story for another time, because I wanted to run for the state seat of Auburn. I was denied that opportunity. Alhamdulillah, in many ways. And then I decided that politics, I was going to help with politics. I was going to serve with my community in politics. I liked it for what it could deliver to people, but I was not going to be in the political life myself. And then I joined a firm called Babcock & Brown, so I resigned. That was an investment house. And after that, I spent 3 years there. And then after that, I left and I bought a taxi company called Lime Taxis. And I ran it. And actually my brother Talal, Yassine, who's here today, he was the CEO of it and I was the MD. So we ran Lime Taxis. We went back to our roots for 5 years, which is this. I don't know if everybody remembers those big Vito vans. Yeah. So we owned and ran them for 5 years. And after a period of time, I did several of those businesses where for-profit organizations met with a social purpose. So Lime Taxis was about disability taxis. So not putting people, I don't know if you remember, taxis used to have this little bubble at the back of them.
Yes.
That's where they put people with autism, disabled, mentally, physically, and it was outrageous. It was horrendous. The way. So we bought them and they actually gave them a 5-star limousine service. But Macquarie Bank, the guy set up called Bill Moss, left. Macquarie Bank, of course, decided to shut it down and we took it on. And that's how we ended up with Crescent Wealth, which was the third or fourth kind of business, and happy to get into that. How we kind of set that up and how we got to that point.
So how did you get from that? So from that industry, and then Crescent Wealth is like 2013, right? So what was the genesis of the idea of Crescent Wealth, and why did you go down that path?
It was always, the interesting thing is, one of the sisters that is well known to you, Sister Aisha Magid. You know her, right?
Yes.
She works with Sister Dalia Ayub, who's now in
Turkey.
In Turkey. And I didn't remember this. I asked her to put it in writing. So she remembers we had an iftar at Sydney University. Like, this was in 92, 93, where she remembers me talking about collectivizing Islamic wealth.
Wow.
And I didn't remember that. Because apparently we had an iftar, people stood up, and it was a session, and I was on the MSA at Macquarie University. I had to come to visit because I come back to my old uni. And she said, you spoke about that and said, what is the one thing the Muslim community needs that we're not building now? And I said, collectivizing Islamic wealth. I didn't use the word super, but it was about coming together and being representative and building together. And I had forgotten about that, but fast forward to about 2009, 10, 11. I had actually got my first legal advice in 2007 saying, what would it look like if we set up a super fund? And I got my first legal advice. And I just left Babcock & Brown. But it took me another 2 or 3 years to sort of think about it and work it through. And then we decided, there were 3 of us, Sami Dandan, Isam Eid, myself, and 4 of us, and Hilal initially, Hilal Yassine. We got together and we thought we were going to build what would look like to build it together. And there was a guy called Bilal Mahmathani. I don't know if you remember him. He was in the community for quite significantly. He had that idea that we were trying to play with, but none of us had any idea about actually super. It's a very specific area. long story short, we got to a point where we were ready to launch, and with one of our portfolio companies. And so we hired a guy called, in February 2010, a guy called Shaban Amran, who's well known in the community, and he was working for MCC at the time. And he was one employee to start it up, and sort of set it up, and he was doing investigations, and you know, we were all very, very blissfully ignorant, because otherwise we wouldn't have done it. No rational person would have done it, because of the cost, the time, the energy, and we're talking millions of dollars to start up a super fund. And then people mistake it for something like a self-managed super fund. You go to a local accountant, a bit of this, fill out this form, sign this. You know, it's starting up a super fund like starting up a bank, and it costs millions to start, and then millions of dollars to actually then get the Sharia compliance in it, because we're very, very serious about Sharia compliance. And you have worked with us in the past, so you'll understand the highly regulated environment and the highly regulated Islamic environment, and putting those together is why people didn't do it in the past. And so to continue the story, so we kind of hired Shaban, he started looking at it, and then we started building it and saying there was a massive opportunity for the Muslim community to collectivize Islamic wealth. But there was also a massive cost to actually building it. So we either had to get really serious, or I couldn't work somewhere else and sort of, it's one of the things that I'm doing, right? And so I decided after going to Hajj with Ismail Davids in 2010, that I was going to actually join it myself. So I had a CEO's offer at the time to go and be a CEO of a publicly listed company, or get really serious about Crescent Wealth and now the Crescent Group. Bearing in mind, Crescent Institute and Foundation had already been founded, the charity and the networking group. So I thought, well, I can always get another CEO's job, as much as it was paying. I want to give this a shot. And I didn't join till about 2012-13 full-time and officially, but we started building a team. We hired Ahmad Khan and several others, and in the early days the board was very much involved. And alhamdulillah, we've built from then to now. We went from 0 to building up and getting our license, which was barakah within itself, because only 2 superannuation licenses have been issued since 1989. Us and Future Super. Everybody else is just a derivative of someone. Like new, that's how rare it was. And we've grown now to 12,000 members, $400 million of funds under management. So we'd be the largest Islamic institution in the country, and growing, alhamdulillah, at one of the fastest rates into in the future in terms of growth of members and FUM. And that has been because of the trust of the community and organisations like NZF, because we're partnered with everybody, and we're trying to defeat the deficit of trust in our community for not only financial institutions, for all Islamic institutions, unless it's a mosque or it's your uncle. Pick one, And the only way you can do that is doing the right thing over a long period of time, and whilst you're going to get it wrong now and again, being actually authentic in your niyyah and in your execution.
So where does the distrust come from in the community of all things, money being run by a Muslim of some sort?
I think there's a broader Muslim distrust deficit. It's a disease, and it's not only just in Australia. I don't get it, I don't understand it, but everybody knows it. So I ask everybody and say, listen, if George shows up and he's a subby, or if Muhammad shows up and he's a subby, how do you treat them? Be honest with yourself. How do you think about it? Very few people say, well, Muhammad, assalamu alaikum, I trust you more because you're Muslim, you're my brother. I mean, and I put that test to people. I'm not going to tell you what the result is, but there's a deficit of distrust. And there's a deficit of distrust in the community because the leadership over the years have let them down, and even in financial services. But there's also a deficit of distrust in financial services specifically because we don't understand what financial service organizations should look like and should act like. Let me give you an example. Let me give you a Lebanese Muslim example because I'm Lebanese Muslim and I know this example really well. So the majority of Muslims in Australia, to a large extent, certainly Sydney, are Lebanese Muslim, right? Now, less so these days, but 10 years ago, vast majority. And then I started talking to my dad and my uncle and about Islamic banks and Islamic institutions. But guess what? They have no concept of an Islamic institution in Lebanon as a bank. There's not one Islamic bank in Lebanon. Not one. So how would they understand an Islamic super fund? And they're difficult enough to understand themselves. And so that's where the deficit of distrust. Like, okay, so what are you going to do with the money? Why do you need it? I bank with Arab Bank. I bank with, whatever, Emirates Bank, whatever. And so that's one. But I think also people's experiences have been really negative. And the only way you can build trust is over a period of time. And I think, I actually don't know what the actual reason is, but we know, and I think everybody would know that there is that deficit with rare exceptions. If you're connected to a mosque, you trust that mosque. But I trust all mosques. If you're connected to an imam, you trust that imam. If you're connected to a school, you trust a school. Maybe. I don't know about all the teachers. I mean, they have different stories, right? And so we have to build institutions that serve for a long period of time, authentically and honorably. And let's not hold ourselves to impossible standards. They're going to make mistakes. There's going to be, nobody's perfect. We're going to drop the ball now and again, but we admit to it and we keep going because we're fallible. But I think that's the reason, but it's improving. It's improving dramatically.
So there's basically, for historical reasons, for circumstantial reasons, people just don't trust other Muslims, and that's writ large when it comes to financial institutions where you need a lot of trust and safety.
Well, what are financial products? They're trust products. And they're not products like, hey, I've got this book. Faraz, will you buy it? It's not transactional. You give me $5, I give you the book. With financial products, if you come and join Crescent Wealth Super Fund, that's the start of the relationship, not the end of it. That's when I have to serve you. I have to get a decent performance. I have to guarantee the Sharia compliance. I have to guarantee customer service. And that's how we get to prove out that there's, you can trust us over a period of time. And so we don't sell superannuation. You can only give information, and people just kind of like, you don't go and Google a lawyer. If you Google a lawyer, you're in serious trouble. You ask your friend. You don't go Google a doctor. Like, do you know a good doctor? Same with financial institutions.
Yeah. So how was then that translated into the challenges that you had once you actually launched Crescent Wealth? What was the initial couple of years like?
Well, the initial couple of years were exciting. I had a bunch of brothers and sisters that were amazing. We were like on a tour of duty. But the community looked at us and gave us a resounding, or two responses. 10% of the Muslim leadership and imams and like, how can you be Sharia compliant? I don't understand. You can't be Sharia compliant. And we'd say, well, we expected that. Please come in. Please have a look at the fatwas. What do you know about Sharia compliance? Wallahi, I know nothing about Sharia compliance. I wouldn't even pretend to have a discussion about Sharia compliance. I barely went to Islamic school. I studied at Sydney University, Orientalist Islamic Studies. Not even Sharia and fiqh in the proper way. So I'm not going to even pretend. I'm a lawyer and a banker. But Dubai Islamic Bank or Armani in Malaysia are the global experts. Come and talk to them. So they'd come in, and after a while we got accepted of the leader as Sharia compliant, because we didn't pretend we knew something we didn't. The other 90% of the Muslim community was inertia, lack of understanding, and like, what do you mean? Why am I talking about super? Mate, I'm 42. I'm 20 years away from retiring. And why am I talking about Islamic super? And over the decade, most people actually know what super is and know who Crescent Wealth is, inshallah. But they say, why should I join? Because, super, if you think about it, is a tax by the Australian government to help you retire. And you ought to be able to take that money and it be Sharia compliant. In order for it to be Sharia compliant, you need a Sharia compliant fund. And for a long time, we were the only fund, and today we're still the only APRA regulated super fund. There are platforms that do it, but they're not the same as us. This is one of the things they do, and they're on a platform with others. And good luck to them. we need a lot more of these products because we offer options to the Muslim community. And we're not holier than thou. Let us build your house in heaven. You know, you're doing haram, you should do this. We are an option. And that option is if you only want a Sharia compliant loan, will only eat halal chicken if it's certified by your favorite certifier twice, you wouldn't even contemplate anything. Why would you accept your money from the government saved on your behalf that's invested in tobacco, riba, alcohol, all the non-Sharia compliant stuff? And so it's an education campaign. And so the Muslim community have now, alhamdulillah, we've earned their trust. 12,000 people to put their money with you is a big number. 400 million is a big number. We could be a lot larger, and inshallah we're growing. But what's much more important for me, which I say to always my team, we can grow to multiple billions of dollars. But if we're not trusted, we have failed miserably. And failed, alhamdulillah, we have not. Our NPS, Net Promoter, and I measure this objectively, not about only what people tell Talal when they see him. We have a Net Promoter score. And for those who don't know what that is, it's just a almost scientific score about what people think about you. And our Net Promoter score is 49. That's an insanely high number. It's not out of 100, by the way. It's out of 200. Negative 100 and positive 100. And we measure it every year. And alhamdulillah, we have people who trust what we're doing and why we're doing it.
Let me ask you this question on that. So some people, and this is a question that I've just received. Tell me about some of the more generally. So what are some of the things that you think you could have done better over the journey of Crescent Wealth? Like, so I mean that achievement of 400 million fund is obviously a significant one. 12,000 is also a very significant one. But actually, before that, what does collectivization of Muslim wealth allow for the community? Do you think?
Okay. Well, I think in a very, let's just keep it really simple.
Yeah.
Let me give you an example. One is Crescent Wealth exists only for the community and by the community. We don't have any other product. We don't have Christian super, Jewish super. We don't have this product. We only were started for that one reason, number one. Number two, what does it allow you to do? Well, one, it allows you to get your return and your super, which is your biggest asset now, because most people can't afford property. It will be most people under 30 or under 35 listening to this podcast and this presentation, it will be the biggest asset. Because generally in Australia, homes are unaffordable. Okay? Especially if you want a Sharia compliant one. You'll get your money certified that is Sharia compliant, number one. Number two, let me give you a story which will explain. Next time the Muslims get attacked in the community, and we say, subhanAllah, what are we going to do when 2GB, whoever, goes after us? You're familiar with that kind of. Who is going to protect and defend us? Where is our Muslim brethren? Well, if there's a Crescent Wealth Super Fund that has $30 billion in it, and the CEO of, I don't know, name a company, random X company, says, I don't know whether I can trust these Muslims. Outrageous. Gets published in the Daily Telegraph. If a CEO of Crescent Wealth, not me, rings and says, I'm the CEO of Crescent Wealth. We have $400 million invested in you. We think what you've done and said is completely inappropriate. I'll just give you one example. If you don't remedy it, because at least we'll take your call, we will be withdrawing because your ethics don't align with our interest. Okay, that's number one. That's number two. Number three, it's about collectivizing Islamic wealth. It's about working together, right? Doesn't mean you accept less return or you got to pay more, or doesn't mean you're lesser, because we want to compete in the general market. Now, again, we're never going to be the cheapest and we're never going to be the best performing because we're competing against $400 billion funds in Australia. But we are certainly in the last 3 years, alhamdulillah, top quartile, and our fees are certainly within the range now. But you're getting a very boutique product because Sharia compliance is no joke. It is no joke. There's a lot of barakah, but you've got to do it right. And that's what we stand on. If we don't have proper Sharia compliance, guess what? We do not have a value proposition. And so that is something that we take very, very seriously. And so, but if we do that properly and deliver to our community, then we can collectivize Islamic wealth to benefit the entire community and give back, give currently, and give forward.
Yeah. So that makes sense in terms of the potential for, I guess, the clout that comes with,
Absolutely.
a significant Muslim player that is able to, I guess, move and shake a little bit with regards to the investment targets in the community. What about? So I mean, and clearly there the what's been achieved is significant. Like I don't think anyone can deny that. What about some of the criticisms around performance? How would you address those? Which I'm sure you're familiar with. I'm not,
well, I'm more than happy to talk about all the things we could have done better.
Yeah.
So first of all, the challenges that we've had. So the most important, there's performance, there's cost, and there's service. At the end of the day, we sell and we have a super fund. Our super fund is Sharia compliant, so it's constrained in so many ways. This is what I mean about the blissful ignorance. If anybody reasonably did a proper feasibility study, they would never start up a super fund. They'd never start up. And let me explain why. So I'm an investment banker to start with, so I'm in the investment world. Sharia compliant investment, everybody assumes, like I did, there's the Islamic world, it's got Sharia compliant, there's the conventional world, it's got conventional. And in the Islamic world, Sharia compliance is 95%, like in Islamic, like in Malaysia, Indonesia, Saudi Arabia, and in Australia we got 1% Sharia compliant, 99% non. The thing is that's not true. In the Saudi Arabia, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, name all the Islamic countries but Malaysia, 90% of their investment is conventional. Which means our universe is much smaller. Which means if I want to invest in shares, Islamically compliant shares, there's very much less to invest in, and they're more expensive, number one. Number two, marrying Australian law with Islamic investment law is very hard. People even on the cusp of it can understand. And therefore, for example, Australian shares. Okay, you want to invest in the top 20 companies in Australia? Makes sense. But 12 of them are not Sharia compliant outright. The best performing companies, the biggest company on Australian Stock Exchange, are not Sharia compliant. I'll name them for you. CBA, St. George, Macquarie Bank, Westpac, the rest. Okay, Woolies, one of the best, and Coles, otherwise known as Wesfarmers, two best companies in the country, in the top 20 always. Best performing, right? We can't invest in them. Why? Because they sell tobacco and gambling. Woolies owns more poker machines in New South Wales than there are in Las Vegas. Okay, then say, so you're a Muslim investor. So I want to guarantee Sharia compliant. Crescent Wealth has to come and in Australian shares, not invest in 12 of the top 20 that give a good return and then meet the market for the rest. So, could we perform better by performance on an 8-year level? Absolutely. The first 2 years, we knocked it out of the park. I actually don't know how. The next 3 or 4 years, we did terribly because we focused on marketing and not investment. We didn't have the right team in place. Last 3 years, we're top quartile, right? But it takes a decade to set up a company. Number one, fees. Fees in superannuation are not enough to run a small super fund. There's a consolidation now, and so we are compared. We have 400 million. I think Australian Super's got 260 billion. It's about to get to 400 billion. We're compared to them. So a Muslim, Muhammad,
in terms of your fee footprint.
Yeah, in terms of what you charge.
Yeah.
So a $400 billion organization, a 400 million. So we're 1% of them. They charge 100 basis points. We charge 200, like 1%. We charge 200 basis points.
Yeah.
But we've got all the Sharia compliance in the world to go. We've got to hire all the people, even though it's a small fund, similar to them, because we've got the same license in that way. And so we're always going to be more expensive. So we've never, relatively speaking.
Yeah.
But you don't come to us because we're the cheapest. We're never going to be the cheapest. And we're never going to be the best one because we're never going to invest in banks, tobaccos, and that is what people got to be realistic. We say before and we say now. We want to give the best possible performance. So guaranteed Sharia compliance. And Sharia compliance, by the way, doesn't just mean we greenwash. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, because I say Sharia compliant, it means that it's audited by Dubai Islamic Bank Sharia every year. We get issued with a note We do go for a full audit process. Sharia compliance doesn't mean Talal thinks it's Sharia compliant. So that all costs time and money.
Yeah.
And also, when you put them all together, I think we've ended up in a reasonably good place. The other thing is service. In the first 5 years of Crescent Wealth, we had all these service providers who were small. We now have a service provider who's much bigger called Mercer, who, with our own concierge service. But service for 12,000 members is never perfect. A call center, response rates, it's always going to have issues. And any group has those. But could we have done better? Absolutely, we could have done better. I think, and the people who judge harshest are actually us internally, because we want to serve every member in every circumstance. So cost, investment performance, service. Alhamdulillah, we've got them to a very, all three of them to a really good level at the moment. Our fees have just decreased by 0.5% in December.
Yeah.
And so our fees are now within the target range of the market, but they're still not the cheapest.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So basically, from your perspective, it's that, and I mean, like that you're being real with people.
Yeah. It's no use. We're built by the community for the community, and people are measuring, and it's super transparent. Pardon the language. It's all online, but we're very transparent, saying what do you want, what do you value most.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
If you don't value Sharia compliance, then don't come to us.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. We'd love you to come, but we also don't want to waste your time. If you say, look, I want you to perform like Australian Super at all times, not over the last 5 years, at all times, and I want, if they're doing 10.4% return and you do 10.2, I'm leaving. Well, we're not. We have extra costs to start with. It's a long-term investment. We're not saying we're not going to perform. That we're top quartile, but you come to us because we're Sharia compliant.
Yep.
Right?
What was there was a recent thing about ASIC and the fees. What was that all about?
This is what I was referring to earlier. There was nothing to do with ASIC. What happened was, when you charge a fee, you say, okay, I'm going to charge, like, you go to a lawyer. Lawyer charges you a fee. We say, we'll charge you 1%. And then the lawyer also estimates what the cost of other service providers is going to be. They estimate. So it's not money coming to you. It's money for the photocopying, money for the courier, money for... I'm just using that as an analogy.
Yeah.
We discovered ourselves that our estimate was wrong. Right? We thought it was 25 basis points. It was like 25, like 0.25%. It was actually more like 0.5%, because it's the disbursements, it's the cost. And so we said to our trustee, we need to be off the market, because we're not sure why these figures don't align, because they were estimates, but the estimates are too low. That's what happened.
Okay.
And so then we got those estimates right, and we're back on the market. But nobody got charged anything they shouldn't have been.
Yeah.
It's the disclosure of those estimates.
Right.
And we're very upfront about it,
Yeah.
Some people decided to have a shot at us unfairly, and I think they got the reaction of the community squarely. But that's a stuff up by us in the disclosures, and we're very, as I said, we took ourselves off market. We said, this is the problem, we've got to sort it, because for us, most importantly, is authenticity and transparency.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. How long were you guys off market for? Like
3 months.
3 months, yeah.
3 months.
Okay.
So when we say off market, it's not like we got off market. It was 3 months of
not being able to take new members.
Well, yes, but it's 3 months of actual work for avoidance of doubt and avoidance to know forensically what it was, what it is we need to do if there was any issues we need to sort out. Who was out of pocket, if any, and it costs hundreds of thousands of dollars of checking and work to make sure we can go back on the market and be very clear that issue wouldn't happen again. So to be for clarity, it's a disclosure issue, not a charging issue. It's about making sure that we disclose and we're accurate in what we're trying to disclose.
Okay. Okay. So that sort of that makes sense. So let me. I mean, let's talk a little bit about, if you don't mind,
I don't mind. Go for it.
What you saw others in the market or in the industry do, without taking names, unless you want to, but I won't. How do you think that, like, what sort of ethics or how do you feel about that as a Muslim?
I think when so let me take one step back. So when we founded Crescent Wealth, we founded an Islamic finance industry in Australia. We wanted to be pioneers in this area, and we did all the heavy lifting, all the hard work, and all the upfront expenditure. Industry does not mean Crescent Wealth alone. We were hoping other Crescents come along because it's a big community. We have 1 million Muslims in Australia. And so we also believe, therefore, of the concept of abundance and a growth mindset. There is plenty of opportunity for everybody. So when players come along, and many have come and go, who don't believe in that, we get worried on two fronts. One is not the Islamic spirit. Nobody likes a player who nudges people on and
kicks them all the way down.
Kicks them all the way down, or even if they're not down, has a shot. Right, number one. Number two, more critically, we're fearful for the reputation for Islamic finance. Because Muslims, we talk about the deficit of trust. Yeah. Already when people came, and this guy Amin who took 230 million and went to Dubai, Ifsol, I remember Ifsol,
yes.
who just one guy disappeared, took everybody's money with him. We already are fighting against that distrust. But they're nothing like Crescent Wealth. We're an institution. They're the guy in a little corner shop. And a lot of these guys in corner shops really worry us because they've got no depth. They're just people who set up in Coburg or Bankstown with a little shop and say we're Islamically compliant. And they try and compare themselves to us, but we are like a specialist Apple store, and they're like go to JB Hi-Fi and take a shelf and then sell you a similar product from that shelf in JB Hi-Fi, which is fine as long as you're ethical about it and you don't take people's money. The problem with what various parties do, they think it's a nudging competition. I have no such concept of that. If a Crescent Wealth 2 comes along, Crescent Wealth 3 comes along, and we're all competing and we're doing a great job, it's great for the community, it's great for the firms, right? But a lack of respect of Islamic spirit and of that kind of, envy type of non-abundance, like it's a small pie, we're cutting it up, is just a crazy way of looking at things, not helpful to anybody. But we are most fearful, and I say this privately, publicly, of another organization coming along, and because Muslims find it hard to distinguish, an Ifsol from a Crescent Wealth. The average punter, the average smart, intelligent, educated, engaged Muslim can't tell the difference, and this is part of the problem that we have. That's what we're fearful of.
Yeah, gotcha. That makes sense. Okay. Muslims and super, right? Do you find, so 12,000 is a good achievement, but obviously Muslims in Australia are what? Adult age, maybe 400,000, right? If we accept 800,000 population,
you're right, yeah.
A lot of kids, blah, blah, blah. So it's still a small...
very small.
As we've talked about before. Do you think is it that Muslims don't know about Crescent Wealth? Is it that Muslims don't care about their super because it's 30, 40 years away? Yeah. Is it that we don't care about the deen, so we don't really care about halal and haram? What do you think is going on there?
I think it's all of the above except the last one.
Okay.
So first of all, we never ever put ourselves as judge about halal and haram. Never. Because we would be the first to say we are not perfect and we're not going to judge anybody who decides not to join Crescent or take a Sharia compliant option. So that's number one. But other than that, the reasons why is that whilst you offer a product, you're offering a trust product, you still got to have respect for your community and for them to build trust in you. Even if they want to join you, perform, show me, I'll come, I'll leave. We're still a superannuation product, number one. Number two, the Muslim community is a very young community. majority, a big proportion are still under 30. And under 30, I mean, you're talking to me about when I'm retiring, bro, let me buy my first house, let me get married, let me get my first good job, then I'll think about that. The third thing is, and even though superannuation is becoming more and more important, the third thing is, so tell me the difference between super, because I don't understand super, and Islamic super. So what's the difference? It isn't just a tax from the government. They take money and at some stage they're going to give it back to you. And even me, a lawyer and a banker who worked adjacent to super, because I worked in investment banking, I did not understand the superannuation world. I had no idea how it worked. And it is a very weird, legal and unique world. So we don't expect people to understand. And so whilst 12,000 is a very good achievement, alhamdulillah, and 12,000 people have trusted us with their retirement monies, there's still a long way to go. But we never think everybody's going to join. And we never judge everybody. And people are still thinking about it. But there's no reason why we can't be 50,000 members and $3 or $4 billion, because it's a growing community. And there's no reason, and I hope, inshallah, بإذن رب العالمين, that there are 3 or 4 crescents competing for that 50 to 100,000 people and offering them services, saying, I've got an app and you don't, and I've got this product and you don't, and actually, you know, like the political parties in Australia, asking for your vote based on policy, not based on, hey, you're Pakistani, I'm Pakistani, you should join me, right? Or I know you, here's $10, this is what we should do. I'm making a political analogy. This is what we need. And Crescent Wealth may be the oldest, but, you know, I'd rather, let's say Crescent Wealth CBA. That's the oldest, been around for the longest. But where's National Australia Bank? Where is Westpac? Where is Suncorp? Where is Macquarie Bank? And they all have a role to play. That's what I'm hoping for.
Controversial question. You can let this one pass through to the keeper if you wish.
Okay, I'm gonna leave it. Should I leave now?
Is there a second Crescent Wealth yet?
No, not yet. Okay. No, it's not controversial at all.
Okay. Well, tell us about that.
There's not yet, because there's got to be an institution that's based on super, and that is an institution, not, there are competitors in that market, but they don't sell the same product.
So what's different? So for the layperson, what is different about
the difference is the JB Hi-Fi versus Apple. We are the Apple store. We create the product and we sell it to you. Other organizations present themselves, and there's one that's well known now, but there's several, and more coming. No problem. But they sit on the JB Hi-Fi platform and they sell you Samsung from there. Okay. But they're not. So if you go to the Apple website, type in superannuation funds, if your name doesn't appear there but Crescent Wealth appears, no, they're not a super fund in the same way.
So what are they? They're reselling? They're retailing?
They're doing it through a platform. Right? They're subleasing somewhere and doing it through a platform. Now, that's not to say they don't have a role. That's not to diss them. Like, because you need an advisor. They will offer you a product, but it's not the same product. But I'm looking for institutions that exist for more than just profit, that exist over the longer term. So there's nothing controversial about those questions. And by the way, I'm prepared to answer any question. But there should be more of the institutions that are Crescent Wealth 2 and 3 and 4 that compete in that space. And there'll be more that will join platforms. And I encourage that. So just to be clear, the amount of people that have come to me and said, Talal, I want to do Islamic finance. I see what you're doing. Not sure whether, because we're going to be adjacency in competition. I said, no such thing. I'll give you the lawyers. I'll give you the accountants. In fact, use this structure. And if you can end up competing with us, alhamdulillah, we have succeeded. And they're pretty shocked. Now, a lot of them then realize how much it costs, how much time there is in it, and how unprofitable it is relative to other things, and decide not to do it. But I encourage more people to join Islamic finance, but to do it authentically and do it with heart.
Okay. Fair enough. Look, there's many other things that we could explore.
Is there something more controversial?
No.
I'm waiting for the more controversial stuff.
Okay. I mean, I haven't checked all the comments that I received.
Yeah.
But I think for now, I think it's probably good. I mean, look, these are conversations that are ongoing in the community.
Sure.
So we hope that this creates more discussion.
Inshallah.
And when some of these snippets go out, and people see, like, okay, they might have some more follow-ups, and
sure.
We'd love to have you back on at some point where we can discuss more. There's obviously so much around politics and so forth. I mean, I really, really want to talk about some of your political history, but as you rightly noted, that's probably another episode.
Yeah.
And any later in my madhab, I'll be sinning for my right? So
right.
I think we do have to wrap up.
I think in every madhab, brother.
Possibly. I just half an hour mark, so I'm just conscious. But no, look, it's been absolutely fantastic, Talal. Thank you so much for, I guess, for telling us about your personal sort of history and background and your motivations. And I think it's very interesting to see where you've come from and where you are right now. I know we got a bit technical with some of the super stuff, which is I think the entire point, that we want to hear, like, what's the latest of what you're up to. But certainly quite moving in many ways, seeing that behind the what people see, which as you were rightly saying before, the suit and the immaculate hair, mashallah,
and the white teeth. Remember, the central casting.
Yeah.
you know, on that I say I'm a reverse coconut.
Okay.
You know what coconut is, right?
Yeah.
It's a brown guy, the white on the inside.
Yeah.
I look like a white guy, but I'm very brown on the inside.
Interesting.
The reverse coconut.
There's a snippet right there, team. Right?
It is.
Okay, no, that's interesting. But I mean, like every time I've spoken to you, I can see that the roots are there. And look, I mean, I'd love to, in future maybe get into some of the political side of things, right?
Yeah, sure.
Labour Party, Liberal Party. We did get some questions about that.
Yeah.
People have them, which is, I think it's great. And,
absolutely.
You've shown you're willing to go sort of punch for punch, and I love that. So I'd love to get into some of that, inshallah, another time.
Amen.
But,
would be my pleasure.
What would be your sort of, I guess, let's end on this one. And okay. I wasn't put up to this. So it's been 10 years of NZF,
yes.
right? And as everyone knows, NZF has been doing a bit of a campaign around that to tell people about what it's achieved in that time. And it's been 10 years of Crescent Well since it went public, right? What do you think is ahead of the community in the next 10 years? Like, where do you see Muslims? And this is a very big question because it cuts across things like politics, Islamophobia. Yeah. When I first got to know you, Christchurch happened not long after. But it was also on the decline of, I guess, in some ways, the febrile Islamophobia that we saw in the 10 decades in the decade before, right?
Sure.
With, I guess, the Arab Spring sort of petering out and stuff. It's a bit of a weird, eerie time to be a Muslim, right? I discuss this a lot with sort of people who've been around, where I don't think it's been as easy to be Muslim and not be attacked in the media than I think at any point since September 11, right? So what are the opportunities that this presents us as a Muslim community?
So you're saying September 11 was the high...
It was the start of a very febrile period.
But now it's better, you're saying?
Well, I would think so. Would you challenge that?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I would challenge that. Yeah. So in Australia, there's two parts in my view, right? And there's the better angels and the less better angels. And there's two Australias. And so September 11, remember, happened after Cronulla riots. Well, the Cronulla riots happened after.
Cronulla riots.
Cronulla riots, that's right.
Yeah.
That happens.
Yeah.
And so there's always an anti-Islamophobia lurking, or anti-anything else. And I like to remind people that the first act of the federal parliament after its inception was about how do you keep the Chinese out. That was the first act. And the Prime Minister, Liberal Prime Minister or Progressive Prime Minister, Liberal, got up at the time and said, Mr. Speaker, I rise to tell you about the test, European language test that we have for all new immigrants. So if you're Chinese and you know how to speak English, they give you the test in Finnish. So to make sure you didn't come. Labor opposition leader said, Mr. Speaker, why are you wasting your time? Just tell them we don't want them. Okay? This is the story of Australia. But on the other hand, there's a story about, well, when Whitlam came in, we opened up our hearts. When refugees come in, we're Vietnamese boat people, the Lebanese in 1975, and you name it. So there's two Australias. Now, we should not forget that there's always going to be two Australias. And so what's in it for us? Well, it goes up and down. We're in the popularity contest. Right now, Russia's gone back in. Yep. Russia, China was always there intellectually, but not through the general populace, right? But Muslims are always there. And so how do you pretend and defend, how do you protect and defend yourself against that? To build Islamic institutions, to have a voice. when Yasmin Abdul Majid was bundled out of the country, whether you like her or you don't like her, it was unfair and unjust. And we couldn't say a thing, right? When
Do you think that could happen now?
Absolutely can happen now, and it will happen now, and it continues to happen. That's why we need strong Islamic institutions, whether they're in financial services, whether they're in schools, which we have, mashallah, whether we have mosques, whether we have centers, whether we have doctors. We need to educate and prepare and collectivize wealth and collectivize knowledge, and lean in, not out to each other. And then, as night follows day, it will happen again.
Okay. It's just a matter of time, in your view.
Just a matter of time.
On that, interesting time with the whole China thing at the moment. Have you?
China thing.
I mean, if you're following politics, I don't know how across everything that's being said about China.
So I'm being a bit facetious.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Right.
This is what I do at ANU in the Crawford School.
Yes.
That's my area.
Yes, okay.
So the whole China AUKUS thing is what you're talking about.
That's right. Exactly.
And so this is really about.
And Keating and his recent comments.
Which I watched entirely. And
Were you there?
Sorry?
You watched it live?
Yeah. No. I watched the video.
Right.
I wasn't there at the press club.
Yeah.
I should have been.
Yeah.
It would have been fun.
That would have been interesting.
But so firstly, I don't agree with Keating. Number one, even though he's a Labour hero of mine.
Yeah. Yeah.
This goes back to Australia is an accident of history and geography. Just remember, Australia is a Western democracy in Southern Asia, effectively, but our triangle of trade and influence and culture and religion and defense goes London, US. It's always been that. However, our economic ties with China, just go north, are very, very strong. But in terms of who we are, we still belong to that triangle. And even though the Americans, even under the ANZUS Treaty, so remember, we're getting a bit academic and technical here. The ANZUS Treaty, where we're supposedly protected, Australia and New Zealand protected with the US, is not a NATO treaty. If we get attacked, America has no obligation to defend us. We can consult with them. And in fact, we have a treaty with Indonesia. If Indonesia gets attacked, we will defend them. And if Australia gets attacked, Indonesia being the world's biggest Muslim country. Now, this is the important context to what's happening here. For some reason, and it's because of China, the Americans have said, and Americans have never shared technology with us, by the way. Everybody assumes that us and America are like that. So they've never given us their best submarines. They've never given us their best defense. They've never given us their best planes. In fact, they act against it in the US Congress. All of a sudden, the Americans said, we will give you our best submarines. And we will give you our best airplanes. And they haven't even worked out how they're going to do it legally, by the way. That's what they're trying to work out. And that's why I believe that our defense into the future, on the balance, is better with America and the UK than with China, because China is rising. Now, do we need to piss off China and to call them names and to be rude and be imprudent and be racist? No, we don't. But as an Australian first, where does our defense lay? And that's in planning for war is the best defense and the best preparation for peace.
Very interesting. Bit of a segue there, but I think
I'm happy to talk politics.
No, thank you, Talal. So again, as I said, great to have you here. I'm sure there'll be a part 2 at some point. Look forward to that, inshallah. And thank you so much for your time.
I want to come every week.
Love it.
Assalamu alaikum.
Real talk. Thank you so much. Jazakallah khair. And assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to your brothers and sisters. Thank you so much for joining in. It's been a fascinating conversation with Talal. And as I said, Ramadan is not too far away. For those of you starting on Thursday, Ramadan Mubarak in advance. We look forward to seeing you with a whole tranche of episodes then. Very, very interesting stuff coming up ahead. And it's going to be a great month, inshallah. So do join us. And I look forward to seeing you along with Sister Reem then. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.